I've been trying to think what it is I enjoyed most about my recent trip to Okinawa. And because it is so recent, it's probably something that's near and dear to my mind at the moment, and I'm still turning over things that happened there. And I was kind of thinking this morning, I was doing a little bit of exercise and thinking about, what can I do on the podcast? Because I've given this one a couple of tries. And I want to talk about, in this podcast, my return to Okinawa and all the things that I love there, not many of which were Okinawan. Kia ora, I'm Tuari Dawson, and you're listening to the Invisible Sensei podcast. I know if you listen to the opening, that was a very provocative opening. And I will get to it, I promise, and explain exactly what I mean. But I want to start with an experience that I had when I was younger and then make my way to the point. It's going to be a rocky road, but please stay with me because I promise there will be a point. Um, we're just gonna take a little walk through the garden of my mind to get there. So back in, I guess, 2000, there was a lot of hubbub. Now I should reference this by saying, in case you didn't already know, I am a little bit of a nerd when it comes to sci-fi and Star Wars and all those sorts of things, and I wear that badge proudly, and I wave that flag without a hint of self-consciousness. But I remember that the hubbub from, I'm old enough to remember when the first Star Wars came out in the 70s, and I was a little kid in school. I just started school, and we didn't kind of have any reference point for it. It was just kind of like this thing that happened, then kind of slowly word of mouth, and then it became what it became, this phenomenon. And you when you're going to school as a kid, you've got the books and the board games and the thises and the that's and the expanded universe stuff. And so there's kind of a theme that kind of happens, but it didn't happen overnight. It happened, I guess, in a boardroom somewhere with people who were absolute geniuses of marketing. But my point being is that we didn't know what we were getting, so there was kind of no excitement around it until after it had sort of happened. Cut to 2000, and they're looking at doing these reboots of the Star Wars franchise. And of course, at that time, I'd never heard the word franchise in reference to movies before. Franchise was something that I think was restaurants and hardware stores. That's what I knew a franchise as being. Anyway, I just remember that people were really excited, fellow nerds, were really excited about what was about to happen. Now, I don't want to get into nitty-gritties about the movies, this is not the point, but I just remember going to see the prequel, the first prequel, and I just remember going there and just being in the movie theatre, back when people actually went to movie theatres, and the buzz in the audience, and just standing outside getting some refreshments and so on before you went in, you get your popcorn and whatnot. And there was just this kind of real positive energy, and people were really happy. And of course, there was people walking around doing all the stereotypical nerdy stuff, wearing lightsabers and costumes and whatever. But the buzz was that people were really happy, and they were talking to each other and kind of sharing and creating this real wonderful buzz about what was about to happen, because it represented so many things to them as kids, probably like myself. And for those of us who weren't popular at school and didn't get asked to parties and were kind of a little bit less jock and less nerd and just sort of something in the middle, it was a really important thing. And so there's all that nostalgia which kind of comes up around it, right? So I was thinking about what I liked about Okinawa, and I love everything Okinawa. Let me just say that. But on this occasion, I guess my focus was, I was kind of looking at, I was there and I was doing the Asato Dojo 100 Kata Challenge on Namanui Beach beneath a shrine. I was going to Josh Sensei and I went and just kind of walked down this main street of Kokusaidori on Karate no Hi and just looked at all the incredible practitioners and just the length and breadth of kokusai-dori just filled with people doing kobudo and karate in different styles, and it was really amazing. But one thing I do remember is the people that I was there with and people that I met while I was there, many of which I would say, oh my gosh, at least 90% of them were from countries I'd never been to before. And so people are speaking all these different languages, you're getting all these different cultures, but there's this real collegial sense. There's this real enthusiasm. There's this real kind of, I can't believe we're here. You get the people who haven't been there before and it's been their life dream to be there. You get young people who are kind of not jaded, but they sort of don't realise what it is for sort of older practitioners to go to Okinawa and what that kind of holds. And the thing which I enjoyed the most was just the positivity that was going on. I think that the positivity that I personally experienced, talking to people of different styles, different grades, different approaches, different countries, different cultures, but coming together because of a love of Okinawan martial arts. I was just thinking, man, this is the way the world should be, but it's not. We know it, you know it, I know it. Outside of Okinawa, outside of, I guess, that really rarefied air, generally people don't talk to each other. I mean, you go to another dojo and you see it. You know what it's like. I certainly know what it's like. And it's kind of, you enter the dojo and people going, who are you and what are you doing here and what grade are you and what grade am I? And, you know, and there's this kind of level of, I don't know, suspicion that kind of exists. So the thing that I really enjoyed was just the idea that, you know, I was sitting down and talking to people who just loved karate, loved kobudo, loved whatever martial art they were doing. And we would have these really cool conversations and go to dinner. I remember one particular day at the Asato Dojo, and I was sitting there with Pankovic Sensei, and, you know, we're just kind of having a coffee and just kind of, you know, shooting the shit, as they say. And both of us were kind of tired, and so he was on the sofa, I was sitting there sort of drooling over a coffee, trying to keep my eyes open. It was one of those really hot days. Well, if you're not from Okinawa, it was a hot day. And next minute, there's a knock on the door, and there's these 8th dans and 9th dans and Uechiru and Aikido and all these people, and we're all sitting on the sofa drinking coffee, taking photos together, and just having this really, really cool interaction. And I guess I didn't really think about it until the last couple of days because I've been trying to frame up the theme for this podcast, because as I've said before, what I do is try to create, I guess, posters or thumbnails for the different podcasts before I do them so that my mind kind of starts mulling it over. It's a little bit of a challenge and it creates a little bit of pressure. Unfortunately, it can take some time to get there. But getting back to what I was talking about, I think that's what I have enjoyed most about going back to Okinawa was the collegial atmosphere. And we talk about Icharaba Chode, you know, we meet once and we are family. And there's a similar concept in my own culture. But I think it's very easy whilst you're there, immersed in that principle in a culture, in a place, in a country, to, you know, I guess pay lip service to and be really into it at the time. But it's harder when you go back to your own country and back to your own dojo. The idea that other people might have something to add or might have some value, or that by training with them it's not about undermining your training, is something that I saw every day on Okinawa. And there are definitely, you know, it's not a perfect microcosm of martial arts worldwide either. This, you know, Okinawa has its political issues, its cultural issues, and, you know, all that sort of stuff is way above my pay grade. But my point being is that wouldn't it be good if we took what we experienced on Okinawa and took it back to our countries and to our cultures and to our dojo and kind of put fear on the back burner? If I have someone who comes to my dojo and they do Uechiru or they do Shotokan or whatever, I don't need to do Shotokan and they don't need to do Gojuru. But having that level of respect and having that level of openness is a wonderful way to learn. And I think that When we don't have that openness and we don't have that sense of curiosity or searching, that's when things kind of stagnate. And I think if you're going to Okinawa, or if you've been to Okinawa, you have heard Icharaba Chode. So how do we take that concept out of this wonderful place where everyone's kind of all lovey-dovey and all joining hands and singing Kumbaya in Okinawa, and just have it in our regular everyday? It's a personal choice, I think. It's the culture that you create in the dojo. It's the culture that you create as a person. And we often mistake curiosity for disloyalty. The idea that you would go and train or look at or experience another style is in some way seen as, how would we put it? Some lack of faith or some lack of loyalty. But I actually invite it. I like it. I like the idea. I mean, a lot of the senior sensei whose names are dropped left, right, and centre, they train together. It's completely different styles of Kobudo and karate, but they train together. So I'm going to try and keep this one tight today. I don't want to waffle on more than I have, but I think that if we're going to talk about returning to Okinawa, it's not only about returning to Okinawa, but it's about learning what is there and taking it back with us to our everyday karate life. It doesn't need to be these huge sweeping things, but I think there's something interesting in there if we can get past our sense of insecurity and embrace Icharaba Chode and look at it as the treasure, or one of the many treasures of the Okinawan culture, not just in terms of karate, but just as a life value. I think that's when Okinawa returns with us.